Every day you feel it. The world trying to break you, control you, and stop you. Your boss, society, even your so-called friends, they all want a piece of you. They want your obedience. They want you weak. But here's the truth. Nobody can truly rule you unless you hand them the keys. Today, you will learn why nothing and nobody can ever break you, control you, or stop you. Unless you allow it, you will see how to turn your will into an unshakable fortress, a power no one can bend or defeat. Number 1. Power is perception. Power is not what most people think it is. They imagine power as armies, weapons, thrones, wealth, or influence. They think power is something external, something others can give you or take away from you. But in truth, power exists first in the mind, and only then in the world. The man who controls perception controls reality. The one who refuses to be deceived by false authority cannot be ruled. Consider this: a king sits on a throne, draped in gold, commanding thousands. His crown shines, his robes are woven with jewels, his armies salute him. But what is the substance of his power? None of those things, not the crown, nor the robe, nor the soldiers, are inherently powerful. They are merely objects, fabric, metal, flesh. His power lies in perception, the perception that the crown means authority, that the robe means status, that the soldiers must obey. If tomorrow the people decided that the crown was meaningless, if the soldiers decided the robe was a costume, the king would be nothing more than a man sitting on a chair. That is the secret nobody tells you. Power is never real unless it is believed in. Those who are ruled because they agree, consciously or unconsciously, that they should be. They accept the perception that the other has power. They kneel, not because their knees are forced to the ground, but because their minds have already surrendered. The strongest chains are not made of iron, they are made of ideas. Fear, obedience, conformity. These are the shackles that keep men enslaved, and these shackles exist only because people believe they must exist. Once you see through the illusion, the chains dissolve. No one can control a man who has decided that their commands are worthless. Look at history. Entire empires have been built on perception. Rome, at its height, ruled lands stretching across continents. Yet the Senate, the emperors, the legions, they were not gods. They were not immortal. They were men, and they were obeyed only because others agreed to obey. When revolts began, when the conquered refused to accept the image of Roman invincibility, the empire cracked. Not because the Romans lost their swords, but because they lost the perception of inevitability. In your life, the same law applies. You believe your boss controls you because he pays you, but in truth, his control exists only because you believe money equals authority. You believe society judges you, but their judgment only matters because you decide their perception is worth more than your own. You believe your enemies can harm you, but they can only harm you if you accept the idea that their words, their insults, their threats carry power over you. If you remove that belief, their power collapses into nothing. The perception of power is so fragile, and yet it dominates millions. A uniform turns a man into an authority. A title makes another into a ruler. A crowd obeys, not because they cannot resist, but because they never dare to question the illusion. The man who questions sees the truth. Authority exists only in the minds of the obedient. Understand this principle, and you will see why nobody can ever truly break you. They may shout, threaten, or even strike, but if you refuse to recognize their superiority, they have no command over your spirit. They may strip away possessions, titles, or comfort, but these are not the essence of your power. Power is the belief you hold about yourself. If you refuse to perceive yourself as conquered, you are not conquered. Think of a prisoner who, though locked in a cell, never allows himself to believe he is owned. The bars may hold his body, but not his mind. He remains sovereign because he refuses to perceive his captors as masters. Now think of a man who walks freely in the world, yet bows to every opinion, every trend, every pressure. He believes himself weak, and thus he is weaker than the prisoner. One lives in chains but is free. The other walks without chains but is enslaved. That is the tyranny of perception, and that is also its liberation. Once you realize power is perception, you can reverse the game. You can create the perception of strength and others will bend to it. You can deny the perception of authority, and others will lose their grip over you. The one who controls perception, beginning with his own, becomes untouchable. Powerful men throughout history understood this. They surrounded themselves with symbols, rituals, and appearances because they knew men obey appearances more than reality. A throne is just wood, but in the eyes of the masses it becomes divine. A uniform is just cloth, but in the eyes of the people it becomes command. These rulers played with perception to master others. But you do not need to rule nations, you need only to rule yourself. If you do not surrender your perception, you cannot be ruled. This is why some men, when insulted, feel crushed, while others laugh. The insult carries no power by itself. It is air, sound, vibration. Its only power is the meaning you give it. If you choose not to perceive it as an attack, it cannot wound you. If you choose to see yourself as unbreakable, then no word can shatter you, no enemy can stop you. Power, then, is not external but internal. The armies, the crowns, the wealth, the status, these are nothing but extensions of belief. A king without belief is no king. A beggar with unshakable will is more sovereign than 1,000 rulers. The world bends not to those who have the most force, but to those who command the strongest perception of themselves and project it onto others. Once you understand this, you will no longer fear control. You will no longer tremble before authority. You will no longer allow anyone to break your resolve. Because you will see that their power is smoke, illusion, fragile as glass, and that illusion only works on those who agree to play the game. You do not need permission to stop obeying illusions. You do not need approval to reject false authority. The moment you decide that your will is the only throne you recognize, every other throne loses its legitimacy. The moment you choose to see through the costume of power, the actors who wear it are revealed as ordinary men. The moment you stop perceiving yourself as weak, you are no longer weak. Number 2, break the illusion of weakness. Weakness is rarely real. What most men call weakness is only an illusion they allow themselves to believe in. No man is born broken, yet most live as if they were. They carry invisible chains, not because those chains exist, but because they have convinced themselves that they cannot move without them. To destroy weakness, one must first expose it for what it is: a lie, a shadow, a trick of perception designed to keep you small. The world thrives on this illusion. From the beginning, you are taught your limits. They tell you what you cannot do, where you cannot go, who you cannot become. Parents, teachers, governments, religions, each in their own way instructs you to shrink yourself. They instill in you a belief that you are fragile, dependent, powerless without their guidance. They do this not because it is true, but because a man who believes in his weakness is easy to control. To convince someone of their inferiority is the most efficient form of domination, for they will police themselves. They will hold back their own potential and submit willingly. Understand this: weakness is not a fact of existence. It is a suggestion implanted by others and accepted by you. If you refuse to accept it, it vanishes. The body may be outmatched, the circumstances may be difficult, but true weakness lies in the mind. When you believe you are too small, too insignificant, too incapable, you have already surrendered the battle. The illusion of weakness is stronger than chains, stronger than walls, stronger than enemies, because it stops you before the fight has even begun. Look at the lives of those who rise above their station. They are not always the strongest, nor the wealthiest, nor the most educated. They are simply those who refuse to believe in weakness. A man born in poverty can dominate kings if he believes himself greater. A soldier with no rank can lead armies if he refuses to bow to fear. The illusion of weakness is destroyed the moment you refuse to give it power. Consider the lion and the sheep. The lion is not stronger than every creature on the savannah. Many animals outweigh him. Some run faster, others strike harder. But the lion is feared not because of his size, but because he does not recognize weakness within himself. The sheep, on the other hand, is harmless not by nature but by belief. The sheep has accepted that it is prey, and thus it becomes prey. Men are the same. Some walk through life like lions, not because they are invincible, but because they deny the illusion of weakness. Others live like sheep, not because they are incapable, but because they accept the illusion that they are. The greatest trick ever played on humanity was to convince it that it is powerless. Weakness is a theater act performed on you daily. Look at how authority presents itself: uniforms, titles, ranks, credentials, rituals. These are not proof of power. They are props designed to convince you that you are lesser. A judge's robe, a general's stars, a banker's suit. Without the illusion, they are only cloth and metal. Yet most people bow to them. They submit because they have been taught that, without these symbols, they themselves are nothing. The man who breaks this illusion cannot be broken himself. He looks at the robe and sees only fabric, looks at the crown and sees only metal, looks at his rival and sees only another mortal. Once the illusion is gone, weakness loses its hold. What remains is raw will, and raw will cannot be stopped by costumes and rituals. This illusion does not live only in authority, it also lives inside you. You have been trained to compare yourself constantly, to measure your worth against others, to focus on what you lack rather than what you possess. This comparison breeds the illusion of weakness. You see someone stronger, and you tell yourself you are weak. You see someone richer, and you tell yourself you are poor. You see someone more skilled, and you tell yourself you are unworthy. But understand, this weakness is not the absence of another man's strength. It is the surrender of your own. The man who looks outward for validation will always feel weak, because there is always someone who appears to have more. The man who looks inward and decides his worth cannot be measured against others destroys the illusion instantly. Every obstacle you face whispers the same lie: you cannot overcome me. The obstacle grows powerful only if you listen. A wall becomes impassable if you tell yourself it is, but for the man who refuses the illusion, the wall is only another challenge. He climbs, he breaks, he finds another path. The difference is not in the wall, but in the mind. Weakness tells you the wall defines you. Strength tells you that you define yourself. History is full of examples of those who shattered the illusion. Slaves who rose to become rulers, peasants who built empires, exiles who returned as kings. They were not gods, not superhuman, but men who refused to see themselves as weak. Their oppressors relied on the illusion. Chains, whips, humiliation. But the moment the oppressed refused to believe in weakness, revolutions began. Empires fell, thrones toppled. The illusion of weakness collapsed under the weight of unshakable will. Even in the most personal sense, the illusion dominates many lives. How many dreams have died not because they were impossible, but because the dreamer believed himself too weak to pursue them? How many talents were buried? How many victories surrendered before the fight even started? The graveyards are full not of those who were defeated, but of those who never dared to fight, because the illusion told them they could not. The cruelest part of this illusion is that it multiplies with time. The more you accept weakness, the more it becomes your reality. Each time you bow, it becomes easier to bow again. Each time you surrender, it becomes harder to resist. Soon you no longer question the illusion at all. You live inside it, convinced it is truth. You no longer need anyone to control you, because you control yourself on their behalf. You obey without command. You shrink without threat. You silence yourself before others even speak. That is the final victory of the illusion, to make you believe you are truly weak. But it is only an illusion. If at any moment you decide to reject it, it collapses. Like a shadow vanishes when the light changes, weakness vanishes when the mind shifts. The man who once trembled can become fearless in an instant, if he chooses to deny the lie. His circumstances may not change immediately, but his essence does, and once his essence changes, the world begins to bend before him. The illusion of weakness is powerful only because you agree with it. Break that agreement, and it ceases to exist. Refuse to see yourself as prey, and predators lose their teeth. Refuse to see yourself as dependent, and masters lose their authority. Refuse to see yourself as incapable, and obstacles lose their height. Number 3, unstoppable will. There is one force that bends the world more than armies, more than wealth, more than laws, the will of a man who refuses to stop. The earth itself yields to such a man. Stones are broken, empires are overturned, Oceans are crossed, not by chance, not by fortune, but by sheer, unrelenting will. To understand this truth is to understand why the weak stay weak and why the strong ascend, regardless of where they begin. Most people confuse will with desire. They believe wanting something is the same as willing it into existence. But desire is nothing but hunger, a passing flame that burns brightly and dies quickly. Desire is fragile. It collapses at the first resistance. Will is something else entirely. Will is the decision that nothing will stand in the way. It does not flicker when the winds of adversity blow. It grows stronger because of them. Will is fire that feeds on obstacles, each difficulty becoming fuel for greater determination. The difference between desire and will is the difference between those who dream and those who achieve. Every man desires greatness, but few are willing to walk through the flames it requires. The willful man does not merely want, he decides. He decides that the path is his, and once the decision is made, the matter is settled. Failure may come, delays may stretch across years, enemies may rise against him, but he does not retreat. The willful man knows that as long as he moves forward, nothing can truly stop him. This is why will is more powerful than strength. The strongest body grows tired, the sharpest sword can break, the largest army can be scattered. But will cannot be destroyed from outside. It can only be surrendered from within, and the man who refuses to surrender his will becomes something greater than mortal. He becomes inevitable. His enemies may exhaust themselves striking him, but they cannot erase him. His rivals may build walls, but he finds a way through, around, or over. His setbacks may delay him, but they do not defeat him. He is not measured by speed, but by persistence. The race always belongs to the one who refuses to stop running. History bends before such men. Think of conquerors who began with nothing, leaders who were exiled, men who were imprisoned or disgraced. Their enemies believed they were finished, yet their will endured. They rose again and again, more relentless each time. It was not luck that elevated them. It was not circumstance that favored them. It was the sheer refusal to bow, the iron law of will that transformed defeat into delay and adversity into strength. There is a strange alchemy in will. What breaks ordinary men empowers the willful. Hardship is not poison but nourishment. Insults, betrayals, defeats, these become sparks that feed the fire. Where others see reasons to stop, the willful man sees reasons to continue. The world tests him with storms, and he grows into a storm himself. He is hardened not by ease but by resistance. Just as steel is forged in fire, the strongest wills are shaped in struggle. Most people collapse not because the obstacle is too great, but because their will is too small. They are slaves to comfort, addicted to ease, worshippers of safety. The moment the path grows difficult, they call it impossible. They retreat, they surrender, they console themselves with excuses. But these are not obstacles stopping them. These are choices they make. Their will was never absolute, and so their fate collapses before the first real test. The man with unstoppable will is not deceived by comfort. He does not expect ease, nor does he demand fairness. He expects resistance, and he welcomes it. Each blow he takes confirms his strength. Each trial proves his resolve. His eyes remain fixed on the end, and his steps continue forward regardless of the terrain. He knows that fortune may abandon him, allies may betray him. The world itself may conspire against him, but none of these matter if his will does not break. The secret of unstoppable will lies in indifference to circumstances. To most men, favorable conditions are necessary for progress. They wait for the right time, the right opportunity, the right support. The willful man does not wait. He acts under any condition, turning even the worst situation to his advantage. If denied resources, he improvises. If denied allies, he moves alone. If denied recognition, he continues in obscurity until the world cannot ignore him. He is dangerous because he requires nothing from outside himself. His power comes from within, and thus it cannot be taken away. This is why such men inspire fear and awe. Their enemies cannot comprehend them. Ordinary logic cannot explain how someone keeps advancing despite repeated defeats. Ordinary men think, surely he will give up now. But the willful man does not give up. His very existence is a weapon against those who oppose him, because they realize no matter how many times they strike, he will rise again. Fighting him becomes exhausting, demoralizing, futile. And in time, his persistence wears down even the strongest opposition. Unstoppable will is not reckless stubbornness. It is not blind insistence on a single path. The willful man adapts, shifts tactics, changes methods, but never changes his end. He bends without breaking, adjusts without surrendering. His path may twist and turn, but his direction remains constant. Others mistake his adaptability for weakness, but in truth it is the ultimate expression of strength. He does not care how he reaches his goal, only that he does. Even in solitude, the willful man is never powerless. Alone, with no allies, no resources, no recognition, he still moves forward. His will does not depend on applause or approval. He does not need validation to justify his path. This independence makes him untouchable. While others crumble without support, he is sustained entirely by his inner fire. His solitude is not a prison, but a fortress, for in it he learns that his will is the only weapon he ever truly needs. To live with unstoppable will is to be free from fear. Fear thrives on the thought of failure, the anticipation of defeat. But to the willful man, failure is nothing more than another step forward. Defeat is temporary, only surrender is permanent. Since he has decided never to surrender, fear has no power over him. Others are paralyzed by the thought of losing, but he sees loss as part of the process. He bleeds, but he continues. He stumbles, but he rises. He fails, but he advances. The man of unstoppable will becomes dangerous even to fate itself. Fortune favors him not because he is lucky, but because fortune has no choice. Chance bends to persistence. Even if fate denies him once, he tries again and again until fortune yields. No wall, no enemy, no betrayal can endure forever against a man who simply refuses to stop. Number 4. Independence over obedience. The greatest chains ever forged are not those of iron, but those of obedience. To command a man to obey is to reduce him to less than himself, to strip him of sovereignty, to make him believe that another man's will is greater than his own. Independence is not merely freedom of body, but freedom of mind, freedom of decision, freedom from the invisible leash of approval. The man who obeys becomes a tool, a servant, a shadow. The man who refuses obedience becomes a master of himself, and such mastery makes him untouchable. From childhood, obedience is presented as a virtue. They teach you to sit still, to follow rules, to defer to authority. Parents demand obedience, teachers enforce it, rulers praise it. Disobedience, on the other hand, is painted as dangerous, rebellious, even sinful. This is no accident. Obedience is the most convenient form of control. A man who has been trained to obey does not need chains around his wrists, for the chains have been embedded in his thoughts. He kneels automatically, not out of necessity, but out of habit. Yet obedience is the death of independence. A man who obeys no longer acts, he reacts. He no longer chooses, he complies. His life ceases to belong to him and begins to belong to those who command. His victories are not his own, for they were granted. His defeats are not his own, for they were arranged. He becomes a vessel for the will of others. He can be fed or starved, praised or punished, raised or discarded, depending entirely on what others demand of him. Such a life may be easy, but it is not his. Independence requires something much rarer: the courage to refuse, to say no when the world expects less, to walk alone when the crowd kneels, to decide by one's own judgment, even when that judgment contradicts the accepted laws, customs, or traditions. Independence is not granted, it is seized. It cannot be bought with wealth or titles. It cannot be inherited by birth. It must be taken by force of will, and once taken, it must be defended at every moment against the demands of obedience. There is a reason rulers glorify obedience. An obedient society is predictable, docile, manageable. Obedience makes men into bricks in a wall, indistinguishable, replaceable, lifeless without the structure around them. Independence, however, is feared. The independent man cannot be commanded, cannot be bribed, cannot be intimidated. He is not bound by opinion or approval, and so he becomes dangerous. He does not need permission to act. He does not need validation to believe in himself. He does not tremble when authority disapproves, because authority means nothing to him. To live independently is to live in constant resistance against the expectations of others. The obedient man asks, "What should I do?" The independent man asks, "What will I do?" The obedient man fears punishment, but the independent man fears nothing except surrendering himself. Obedience bends the spine, independence straightens it. Obedience silences the tongue, independence sharpens it. Obedience kills the spirit, independence breathes life into it. But independence is not recklessness. It is not the childish refusal to follow any rule simply for the sake of defiance. True independence is the mastery of judgment. It means obeying only when obedience serves your own will, not when it is demanded by another. To follow a law because it aligns with your interest is not obedience, it is choice. To follow a command only when it suits your ambition is not submission, it is strategy. Independence does not mean rejecting all order, it means rejecting all servitude. The obedient man depends on approval. His actions are governed by fear of rejection. He dresses to please, speaks to please, works to please, and lives to please. His existence is a mirror reflecting the desires of others. Strip him of approval, and he collapses. The independent man, however, is indifferent to applause or insult. He does not need recognition to justify his path. Praise does not inflate him. Criticism does not wound him. His worth is defined by himself, and therefore it cannot be stolen. Consider how empires have always risen on the backs of obedience. Soldiers march not because they believe in the cause, but because they obey. Citizens pay taxes not because they choose to, but because they obey. Priests demand rituals not because they matter, but because obedience maintains control. And yet, a single act of disobedience can unravel it all. A soldier who refuses to march, a citizen who refuses to kneel, a thinker who refuses to stay silent. Such independence can ignite revolutions. Power collapses when obedience is withdrawn, for obedience is the only soil in which authority grows. The illusion of weakness, once believed, breeds obedience. A man who thinks himself small assumes he must serve someone greater. But the independent man shatters this illusion. He sees that no man is born to command another, that no crown, no title, no robe can make one man's will superior. He bows to no throne, kneels to no altar, and submits to no law unless he himself decides it serves him. This refusal makes him sovereign even in poverty, free even in chains, greater than kings who rule over obedient millions but cannot rule themselves. Independence is not without cost. The obedient man is rewarded with safety, comfort, acceptance. The independent man is punished with resistance, hostility, isolation. He is feared, ridiculed, even hated, for he exposes the weakness of those who obey. His very existence is a rebuke to their submission. They despise him not because he harms them, but because he reminds them that their chains are self-imposed. But the independent man accepts this cost willingly, for he knows that comfort bought with obedience is slavery, and isolation bought with independence is freedom. There is a profound strength in the man who needs no master. He may lose wealth, he may lose friends, he may lose position, but he never loses himself. He stands unshaken when the obedient fall, because his foundation is not built on approval. He cannot be blackmailed, for he cannot be forced to betray himself. He cannot be threatened, for he values freedom above security. He cannot be seduced, for he does not crave recognition. This makes him untouchable in a way the obedient man can never understand. To live independently is to declare war on the invisible empire of obedience. It is to strip authority of its false aura, to see through its illusions, to recognize that every command is only words, every demand is only pressure, every law is only an agreement that can be broken. Independence means refusing to be ruled unless you decide the rule is worthy. It means treating the world not as master, but as battlefield, where every demand is met with the question, does this serve me, or does this enslave me? Number 5. Dominion of the self. The greatest empire a man can ever rule is himself. All other power is fragile, temporary, vulnerable to betrayal and decay. Thrones crumble, armies scatter, riches vanish, but mastery of the self endures. He who governs his own mind, his own impulses, his own fears, becomes greater than any king, because he cannot be dethroned. Dominion of the self is the only power that cannot be stolen, for it exists entirely within. Most men, though they appear free, are slaves. They are ruled by appetites, desires, moods, and fears. They are commanded by hunger, commanded by lust, commanded by envy, commanded by anger. One moment they seem powerful, the next they are broken, simply because an impulse dragged them into weakness. Such men may control nations, may command thousands, yet they remain prisoners of their own undisciplined nature. A man who cannot master himself is always vulnerable, because any enemy who knows his weakness already controls him. Self-domination begins with understanding this truth. The world does not conquer you. You conquer yourself through surrender. Temptation does not defeat you unless you obey it. Fear does not defeat you unless you submit to it. Anger does not defeat you unless you allow it to command your tongue and your hand. The real battlefield is not outside, but inside. And most men lose that battle every day, making them slaves without ever realizing it. To rule yourself is to make your mind your fortress and your body your servant. It means deciding what you will feel, what you will pursue, what you will endure, rather than being dragged by instinct like an animal. The man who rules himself does not need constant distraction or indulgence. He can endure silence without fleeing into noise, endure hunger without begging for food, endure loneliness without selling himself for companionship. He has made his will into a throne and seated himself upon it, refusing to be overthrown by weakness. Look at how easily most men are controlled. Promise them pleasure and they obey. Threaten them with discomfort and they obey. Offer them approval and they obey. The reason is simple. They do not rule themselves. They are ruled by craving, by comfort, by fear of rejection. Whoever provides or withholds these things becomes their master. But the man who rules himself is immune. He does not tremble before loss, because he does not depend on possessions to define him. He does not betray himself for approval, because he does not hunger for it. He does not fall at the feet of temptation, because he has decided that temptation is beneath him. Such a man cannot be blackmailed, cannot be bribed, cannot be seduced. His enemies find no lever with which to move him. Dominion of the self requires discipline, and discipline is hated by the weak. Discipline means denying yourself what you crave now, to strengthen yourself for what matters later. It means enduring discomfort, pain, hunger, ridicule, without breaking. Weak men reject discipline because they mistake it for punishment, but in truth discipline is freedom. A man ruled by discipline can choose any path and endure it. A man ruled by indulgence is chained to every craving, every impulse, every passing mood. One is sovereign, the other is a prisoner. The ancient conquerors understood this. Before ruling others, they first ruled themselves. They trained their minds to endure solitude, their bodies to endure hardship, their spirits to endure betrayal. They deprived themselves of comforts to sharpen their strength. They denied themselves luxuries to harden their will. They knew that the man who cannot deny himself cannot command others. To lead armies, to build empires, to bend nations requires first the ability to command your own heart without hesitation. This dominion does not mean coldness or lifelessness. It does not mean refusing to feel. It means refusing to be ruled by what you feel. Anger can be used as a weapon if wielded with mastery, but if it controls you, it destroys you. Desire can be fuel for ambition if directed, but if it consumes you, it enslaves you. Fear can sharpen your instincts if acknowledged, but if it dictates your actions, it paralyzes you. Emotions are like wild beasts. They can serve or they can devour. The man who masters himself is the tamer, the master, the sovereign. There is no greater strength than the ability to remain unmoved. When others panic, he stays calm. When others despair, he stands firm. When others rage, he remains deliberate. This calm is not weakness, but supreme strength. It unnerves his enemies. It commands respect from allies. It gives him clarity when all others are blinded. He cannot be baited, cannot be provoked, cannot be manipulated, because his dominion over himself is absolute. Men waste their lives seeking to control the world, yet they never attempt to control themselves. They try to bend others to their will, yet they collapse before their own appetites. They try to rule cities, yet they cannot rule their own tongue. They try to conquer nations, yet they cannot conquer their own fear. And so, though they may appear powerful, they remain hollow. A man who has not mastered himself has built his life on shifting sand, and eventually it collapses. Dominion of the self is also dominion over time. The undisciplined man wastes his days chasing pleasures, running from pain, begging for approval. His time is stolen from him by every passing distraction. But the man who rules himself owns his hours. He spends them with precision, invests them with purpose, directs them like arrows toward his ambition. He is not pulled by the tides of mood or whim, but steers his own course like a captain through storms. Time obeys him because he obeys himself. Such mastery creates a paradox. The man who controls himself ends up controlling others without effort. For when others see that he is unmoved by bribes, unbroken by threats, untouched by temptation, they begin to fear him. They realize he cannot be manipulated the way they can. His indifference to the chains that bind them makes him dangerous. His self-possession becomes power, because others recognize that he has what they lack. They may command armies, but he commands himself, and in the end that is greater. To dominate yourself is to be free of dependence. Most men are addicted to something: comfort, praise, possessions, indulgence. Remove these, and they collapse. But the man who rules himself is addicted to nothing. He uses comfort but does not depend on it. He enjoys praise but does not need it. He owns possessions but is not owned by them. He indulges when he chooses, abstains when he chooses, never controlled by either. He has reduced life to its essence, his will commanding his existence, and nothing higher than that. A man who possesses dominion of the self becomes unbreakable in ways that cannot be seen. He may be stripped of wealth, but he does not despair. He may be exiled, but he does not yield. He may be hated, but he does not beg for love. He may be opposed, but he does not falter. Everything external can be taken, yet he remains intact, because the core of his power lies within. His throne is not built of gold but of discipline, not raised on the shoulders of servants, but on the strength of his own unyielding will. You have now seen the truth: nothing, and nobody can break you, control you, or stop you, unless you allow it. Power is perception, weakness is illusion, will is unstoppable, independence is freedom, and dominion of the self is the throne upon which true strength sits. The world is full of those who kneel, who obey, who surrender before the battle even begins. But you are not one of them. You have heard the call to rise above illusions, to tear away the masks of false authority, to refuse the chains they try to drape over your spirit. The question now is simple: will you live as most do, blind and obedient, or will you seize the dominion of your own life? The choice is yours, and once made, it will set the course of everything that follows. If you are ready to keep sharpening your will, if you are ready to learn how to walk through this world, untouchable, unbreakable, unstoppable, then this is only the beginning. Subscribe now and join me as we dive deeper into the secrets of power, freedom, and absolute self-mastery. The empire of yourself awaits.